This might change everything for the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's getting pretty crazy in Leafland. The Leafs are playing the Boston Bruins again in the first round of the playoffs, and Austin Matthews unfortunately does not get to the 70-goal milestone. Guys, welcome to the live stream post-game reaction and preview for the playoffs. But before we go any further, just a reminder that about 80% of you who are watching our videos and tuning on are not actually subscribed. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything Toronto Maple Leafs. And the playoffs are finally here, guys. It's time. And like I mentioned, Austin Matthews, unfortunately, did not hit the 70-goal mark. But to tee it up, we'll get into the playoff series with the Bruins first. And please send your questions into the chat box there. What you thought of the game tonight, which in my opinion didn't really matter, and what you think of the series against the Boston Bruins going forward. It's gonna be crazy, man. There's a lot to unpack here. I think it's gonna be very enjoyable to watch the Leafs and Bruins again for the fourth time in 11 years. But again, lots of trauma for Leafs fans, so it's gonna be fun. So let's get into the matchup. I brought this up yesterday as well, and this has been spun around on Twitter all day about how the Leafs match up with the Bruins, which, as you can tell, is not good. All season, 4 wins for the Bruins, 0 for the Leafs. Bruins outscored the Leafs by double. The power play percentages speak for themselves, horrible. And the save percentage, which I think, and what I wanted to get into here on this stream, is going to be the difference maker in this series. The Bruins have 2 elite goaltenders, and something I want to touch on later, Samsonov, for the Leafs, obviously won them a playoff series last year, hasn't played against the Bruins so far this year, which I think is interesting. I think his last start against the Bruins was last season, at the beginning of last season, so that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. So heading into the series, I think that's going to play a crucial part. If you look at the Bruins lineup on paper, the Leafs match up well against it, offensively at least, those line matches, and it's a much different Bruins team than we're used to. They're a lot younger, and it's just different matchups, different center matchups. Obviously, like Coyle's taken on a huge role that he probably shouldn't be playing, but he's doing well in. That's, a story in itself. But it should be a lot of fun to watch, but it's going to be the battle of the goaltenders. Let's get nothing, let's make no mistake about it. It was last year, and it's going to be again this year. But Samsonov, he has the tools. I believe in him. I think he has the tools, so it'll be interesting to keep an eye on. And game 1, it's officially scheduled. It's going to be this Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Pretty interesting playoff schedule around the league, just to touch on that. I think that's a little weird, the timing of everything. But anyway, it should be very exciting, and it all kicks off with the Eastern Conference the first 2 days. That's going to be a lot of fun. I wonder if the playoff schedule looks a little bit different this year as well, because there is no break in between the regular season and the playoffs. Like, the Leafs played tonight in a pretty meaningless game. Few takeaways from it, I would say, but pretty meaningless nonetheless. And it's going to be, it's going to be interesting. But something I wanted to touch on too, I think this is a little, stretching a little bit. Hot take that nobody's talking about. Keefe had a feeling we would face the Bruins in round 1. How would he possibly know that? And kept Samsonov away from those games on purpose. Old school tactics. Not sure that's exactly the case. I don't think that is, exactly the case at all. And thank you all for tuning in again. We got 16 of you in here. This is awesome. Send in your questions, guys. If you got any questions or any thoughts you have about the Leafs, I'll get to things in a second. I just wanted to close out my thoughts, but I do see a couple comments here from earlier. I'll get to those in a second. About Mitch Marner, pretty crazy. We'll touch on that for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting for sure, this playoff series. But I don't think Sheldon Keefe knew they were going to play the Bruins. I don't think that was on purpose. I think it's just how the schedule shaked out. But it is interesting that the Bruins haven't played Samsonov so far this year. I think it's going to be Cool to keep an eye on. And asked for an update before the game tonight on injured players Domi, Yarncroke, McMahon. Keefe said they're all making progress. The outlook for game one, I would say all three are possibilities, which was not the case yesterday. It was looking like Domi and Yarncroke would not play, Domi would play. It would be McMahon and Yarncroke who weren't going to play. And Domi and Yarncroke both skated this morning, and it's the first time that Mark Masters had seen Max on the ice since Saturday's game, which is pretty cool. That's good news. That's great. I hope that Domi's got to come back because he's got to be on that first line. I've seen 2 games of Mitch Marner back on the first line, and I'm ready for Domi, Bertuzzi, and Matthews again. I don't know what you guys think. Yes, that needs to happen. From Hockey Player, who's winning the cup this year? Your Toronto Maple Leafs with the help of the World Destroyer, Austin Matthews. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. The Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win the Stanley Cup this year. That's my guess. Of course, it might be a little bit biased, but come on, that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen this year. Well, last thing I wanted to touch on too before we get into questions and really the nitty gritty of everything. William Nylander is officially the new Iron Man for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Played all 82 games this season, and he only missed 1 game the past 3 seasons. That is awesome for Nylander. Congratulations to him, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And to touch on something here, I'm Shaked said Mitch Marner's ego is crazy. The whole game he's trying to score. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think he's just trying to score, get his team in the game. Not everything has to be about Matthews getting 70. Yes, it's a great milestone, but when you have an opportunity to score, you should take it, I think. Now, do I think it's a completely different question? Do I think Marner should be on Matthews' line? No. I think we've seen enough so far this season with the personnel they have on the team this season that is something that does not need to happen. I don't think that is the case. So I would and spreading out the scoring against the Bruins, I think will pay dividends. I think we've seen enough of that this season to know that that's what we should be doing. So yeah, I think that would be great. Listen, from David McCulley, Liljegren, tough season, dude. Tough season for Timothy Liljegren. I think he's a much better player than he's shown. That ankle injury, man, I think that really messed him up for the year. He has not been the same since, and that was early on in the year. A lot of people forget about them. He hasn't been the same since, so I think that definitely had something to do with it. Thank you all for joining the stream once again. Just wanted to say that. Throw your questions in the chat box, and I will certainly get to them. Anything you think about the series or the game tonight, all of that. But yeah, I think Liljegren is a better player. I think he's a better player than he's shown this year. I just don't think he's as advertised, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think he's going to be a superstar, but I think he can play definitely better than this year. I think he makes some very interesting, soft plays in certain parts of the ice that I don't appreciate. But I think he's going to get better. He's a very good, I don't know, man. He was a good two-way defenseman, and then I'm not sure what happened. I think it's the injury. I definitely do. And yeah, Matthews finishing with 69 goals. Honestly, 70 would have been great, but 69 goals, you couldn't write that any better. That's hilarious. That is so funny for him to score 69 goals and finish the season with that. Sucks too, because he could have finished with like 72 goals on the season, man. Unreal. He played great today. A couple posts and stuff like that. And from Danny Cutler, have faith. Leaf fans are fearing Boston. I agree, man. Ever since it was announced last night, wow. The pessimism is insane. And I mean, for good reason. There's a lot of trauma packed in there. 3 series that did not go the Leafs' way. All of them went to Game 7, and every single Game 7 was a disaster. So I totally agree with that. I mean, I have a gut feeling about the Leafs beating the Bruins this year. I just don't know. I'm not saying it's going to be like 4 or 5 games. I'm not saying the Leafs are going to steamroll them. I just have a feeling. We saw it last year. I have very mixed emotions about this Leafs team now because the roster is different. I'm excited to see what Bertuzzi and Domi do in the playoffs. Very, very mixed emotions about the Leafs this year because we saw them win a series last year against Tampa Bay. Like, Tampa Bay is fantastic. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I have a gut feeling that they're going to beat the Bruins. I just don't know if they go any further in the playoffs. That's the thing. Because I just don't know what they have in the tank. Like, they haven't shown. It happened last year against Florida. You run into the same issues. Florida beat you up. Tampa obviously tried to do that, but the Leafs just stuck to their game and they ended up winning, right? If you do the same thing all the time, eventually it's going to, the outcome's going to turn. So I think, I don't know. I have a gut feeling that the Leafs are going to beat the Bruins, but it's going to be a tough series. I wonder, too, who takes the annual suspension for the Leafs, because every year it happens in the first 3 games. Every year it happens. So take your pick. I'm going to take McCabe because he plays with an edge. So I'm going to take him. But yeah, man, I think, I think when you're down and out, like Leaf fans are in this situation, like obviously last year felt a little good, but you don't want to get too high because it's only one series. You come in a little pessimistic for series like this. So it's going to be, I don't know. I have a gut feeling that they beat the Bruins, but it should be fun. Thank you all for joining the stream again. This is a lot of fun. Leafs just wrapped up their season. They're playing the Boston Bruins in the first round of the playoffs this year. And there was a lot of people making making noise today on Twitter about this graphic specifically and how the Bruins have won 6 straight playoff series versus the Maple Leafs. Obviously, the Maple Leafs haven't beat the Bruins in the postseason since 1959. And the stats just don't look good for the Leafs. There's a lot being made about this. And I would just like to say regular season doesn't really matter. The accolades are great, like Matthews scoring almost 70 goals. It's all great, fun and great. But when you look at this, I thought this was really interesting too. The Maple Leafs had a 3-1-0 record versus the Bruins in 2017-18, lost that series in 7 games. The Maple Leafs in the COVID Canada bubble were 7-2-1 against the Canadiens, lost that series in 7. And then the Leafs were 3-0-1 against the Panthers last year, played them really well in the regular season, lost to them in 5, got smoked in 5 games. Like the Leafs didn't have a chance in that. Like they won game 3, but it was tight. So it's going to be fun. And yeah, exactly. Like Danny, exactly. As long as they beat the Bruins once, I mean, you kind of feel good about it. Kind of feel good about that. And hopefully they can take it further. I think winning one series, like last year, I was very surprised that they lost to the Panthers because I thought that one series win would kind of build momentum for them and they'd be able to. We see it all the time. Like it happened with Florida last year. You see it all the time. They build off the momentum and they go to the Stanley Cup final, for example, right? So I thought that's what was going to happen. I was very wrong. I wasn't convinced that they would get past the first round last year, just based on what we've seen. They did it. And then nothing happened after that. So I think it'd be nice. The downfall of Nylander needs to be studied. Not sure. Nylander had a great year, man. He makes some interesting decisions. And there was also a weird play tonight where he kind of batted the puck. It led to a goal. I don't think anyone cared about the game tonight, I'm going to be honest. Don't think any of those players really cared what was happening at all. So not saying that it's a bad thing. I think, a good thing. I just think like building habits is very important. Building good habits, stuff like that. I hate seeing it, but it's hard to get mad because it's just a nothing game. And I think a lot of people just didn't care about this game. But yeah. I'm not sure where the Nylander slander is coming from. He had a great year, and just because, like, I see a lot of Phil Kessel slander in Nylander, where it's like, yeah, man, he's not that type of player. You know exactly what you're gonna get from Nylander, and I don't think it's Nylander's fault. Same as Phil Kessel. I don't think it's Phil Kessel's fault that the Leafs were not built properly when he was around. I don't think that that's the case. So I don't think it should fall on Nylander's shoulders. I think he's a very good player. Same with Mitch Marner. I just don't know if he's a good fit for the team to win a Stanley Cup. Does that make sense? But Mitch Marner's a great hockey player, right? It's true. And he puts up a lot of points. Great. But I don't think Nylander is a bad player at all. And yes, I totally agree. I do not want to see the rat in round 1. Oh my goodness. Marchand is going to be a pain for Toronto. It's going to be a battle, man. Like, it's going to be I'm telling you, like, if you just objectively look at this playoff series, it is going to be a battle. It's going to be entertaining. I don't care. Like, no, I do care. I shouldn't say that. Even if the Leafs lose, it's going to be entertaining, which it always is. And I think that's fun. I think that's a good thing. But they're not going to lose. They're going to beat the Bruins. I have a gut feeling about this year. They're going to beat the Bruins. from I'm Shaked. I hate his playstyle. I think you're referring to Nylander here. I hate his playstyle. It's just cherry picking and waiting for the puck to come to him. I don't think that's necessarily true all the time. I think he has pretty decent defensive numbers. And it is sometimes true. He does wait up at the blue line, but if he's waiting at the blue line while the other team's changing, I wouldn't necessarily call that cherry picking. I would call that finding an open lane and trying to make a play. But yeah, I think Nylander always comes up big in the playoffs. So I'm wondering what he's gonna do this year. He always turns it on, and it's true. He just does. And he gave the Leafs a chance last year in Game 5. Like he does score these goals. So that's just yeah. I don't know. I love Nylander. I love what he brings to the table. Yes, I wish he played a little more aggressive. Sure. But I think he's a good hockey player. So that's that. From J Money 7, Leafs always follow the same pattern. Yeah, is true. And I think that's why this playoff series is so, what is the word for this? It's going to be monumental, this playoff series, because either the Leafs win and finally slay the dragon, and who knows, the sky's the limit after that. Yeah, we'll see about that. But either they slay the dragon and the sky's the limit, or they lose in the first round and people are getting fired. Like, there will be a new era. There could be different players. There could be big trades. I don't know how they would really make it work with the new trade clause. But anyway, it could be in a year's time where there's contracts coming up. Things will be different after this playoff series. After this playoffs in general, or after this playoff series, like whether they win or lose. I think it's exciting. I think the prospect of that is very exciting. It's going to be fun. And yes, they do follow the same pattern. They've kind of made their bed with this team and these signings they have, and these guys have to figure it out. And if they don't, people are going to pay for it with their jobs, and things will change. And that's just the way it is. And I think finally, if it happens again, if the Leafs happen to lose again, people are going to want change. So good. There should be change. And I think I teeter on the side of, yes, things should change, because I watch a team like the Florida Panthers and I go, the Leafs don't play like that. And the Panthers went to the Stanley Cup final. The Leafs just don't play like that. So I think they need to not make your team more like that. They just need more of it. Like, I don't want you to turn into the Vancouver Canucks after they lost to the Bruins, where they just got a bunch of tough guys after. And that was it. And the team kind of fell off after that. I don't want that. But I think you need to, I don't know. There could be a few more changes, but we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen like Bertuzzi in a Leafs jersey in the playoffs. We haven't seen it. He was amazing for the Bruins last year. They still lost. Amazing for the Bruins. So I still want to see him. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Domi needs to come back for sure. And yes, thank you everyone for tuning into the stream. Again, send your questions in the chat box. I'll certainly get to it. Danny from the 17 and 93 era. My favorite player growing up, personally, was Doug Gilmour and Matt Sundin. Love them. Just the way they played. So, it's so fun. And Matt Sundin he scored some big goals. And those Leafs teams back in the day, I mean, they made the conference final without Sundin one year. But still, he came back, scored a huge goal. Remember that? That was, man, they need some moments like that now. They need some moments like that now. That is what would change things. That'd be great. If we had moments, I know guys put up points, but there aren't too many moments, if that makes sense. Like playoff moments that you'd be like, that was the moment. Like, obviously we have last year's John Tavares goal, overtime goal. They need more of those moments, man. They just need more of it. What could happen to This is from Dylan Reynolds. I'll get to Hockey Player's question in a second. What could happen to Sheldon Keefe, Brendan Shanahan, and Brad Treliving if the Leafs lose in the first round again? We have a video on this, actually. So if you want to go check it out after the stream, we have a video on it. Basically, what's come out, and there's a new president, or CEO, I should say, of MLSE, and he's reevaluating everything. And it sounds, through reports, it does sound like they are extremely pissed off with the results of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs, since the revamp of MLSE in around 2015, are the only team to not win a championship. Marlies did it, Raptors did it, Argos did it. Everyone did it. They all won the championship. Leafs did not. They're pissed. They want changes. If the Leafs lose in the first round, I have no problem believing that Shanahan will be fired and Keefe will be fired. Brad Treliving just got here. Now, I'm not saying his job is safe, but he just got here, so I wonder if he does keep the job, right? I'm not convinced that he would get fired. But if the Leafs lose in the first round to the Boston Bruins, I do believe Brendan Shanahan and Sheldon Keefe would be relieved of their duties. I do believe that. Now, if they go to the third, I don't know. Things get complicated if they go to the third round, let's say. We haven't seen it. Until we see it, we'll make a comment then. But that has not happened. So if they do lose in this first round, I do believe Shanahan. Listen, Shanahan's been here for a long time. A lot of the same things have happened, and not a lot of good things have happened. So in playoffs, at least, there's a lot of records, and I'm sure they've broken records in merchandise sales. And everyone in the city and surrounding areas owns an Austin Matthews jersey. Over here. And yeah, like, I'm sure that's all great, but they haven't done anything in the playoffs, man. They gotta get on that. And yes, it's true. I mean, the Leafs have the talent, but they're inconsistent, and the pressure gets them. They have a lot of guys who the pressure gets to, and you can see it. And they're playing the Bruins in Boston. Boston has home ice. Like, I want to see something in this playoff series that makes me think otherwise. I want to see it. They have other guys in the lineup now that we're supposed to change the tide. Bertuzzi, I keep mentioning him. Domi, these guys, Reeves. Let's see it, man. Here we are. Let's see it. Prove us wrong. Prove everyone wrong. Everyone, because even doubt is starting to creep into Leaf fans' minds. Prove everyone wrong. That would be great. Who do you think is going to get their face licked on the Toronto Maple Leafs by the Rat? Yeah, I don't think that's happening again. Although when that did happen, like, it's a little frustrating, but like, to look back on, that's a little funny. And it happened to Tampa Bay too. I think it was Callahan got his face licked as well from Marchand. Very interesting tactics, man. Marchand just wants to win. Thanks, Danny. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Love your questions and your input. That was great. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Again, send your comments or send your questions in the chat box. I'll answer pretty much anything you think about the Leafs. Austin Matthews not hitting 70. The playoff series coming up. Leafs are playing the Bruins at 8 p.m. on Saturday. Game 1 in Boston. I got chills saying that. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Yeah, it's going to be a roller coaster for the Maple Leafs this year. It really is, because every goal, every save, everything hangs in the balance. You know, there's going to be changes coming soon, like if they don't get it done. So it's going to be crazy. And I wanted to touch on this again. Regular season is not the playoffs, guys. Toronto Maple Leafs had a 3-1-0 record versus the Bruins in 2017-18. Lost that series in 7 games. They had a 7-2-1 record against the Canadiens in the COVID Canadian bubble year. Lost that series in 7. We're up 3-1. The Toronto Maple Leafs had a record of 3-0-1 against the Panthers last year. Lost that game, or lost that series in 5. All right. Regular season does not matter. It does not matter. But let me know in the comments what you think of this Leafs playoff series coming up. Do they have a chance against the Bruins? What do you think? Do they have a chance? I think I said it earlier in the stream. I have a gut feeling that they might win this playoff series. I do. It's just something we saw it last year that they got it done. And I mean, it wasn't exactly the caliber of hockey, let's say the Florida Panthers or Boston Bruins play, but they got it done against the Lightning last year. So it makes me believe that they could possibly beat the Bruins. And on paper, everyone's like, oh, the regular season stats, this and that. On paper, and I'm talking about on paper, not on the ice. We haven't seen it yet. The series hasn't started. But they match up extremely well, especially the forward group. They match up extremely well. The only thing this series is going to come down to is goaltending and coaching. It is. It just is. The line matching, the coaching, maybe home ice will play a factor. Not sure. It's going to be interesting. From JMoney7, I'll get to your question in a second, or your statement in a second, Dylan. From JMoney7, do the Leafs need to trade some offensive firepower for defensive solitude to have a shot at playoff success? Yes, and I think that's been the case for a long time. They have a lot of money locked up in the forward group. Now, trade, I'm not sure if that is available anymore. That was available last summer, and then there was the whole debacle with Kyle Dubas getting let go, and Brad Treliving coming in right before the Bruins Digest in the chat. Oh, here we go. Would love to stream do a dual stream or something after a game. That would be fantastic. Let's have a nice fair series. Let's hope it's nice. I say fair, but I hope it does get physical. Playoff hockey. Would love that. That'd be great. But good luck to the Bruins. Obviously disappointing last year, and not like the Leaf season was much different in the end. But to get back to what I was saying, I think with John Tavares and Mitch Marner's contracts coming up, if Mitch Marner doesn't resign this summer, John Tavares is coming off the books, and he's going to, if he comes back, it's going to be for very little. So I think you can go look for a defenseman after that. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to compete next year, just based on the salary cap. I don't know. I know Brad Treliving wants to rebuild the blue line, but you only have so much money, and a lot of the money that's going to become available is going straight to Nylander on his new deal next year. So it's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on. I think I don't know if a trade is available to do that at this point. I think they've absolutely made their bet. If you talked to me like 2-3 years ago, that would be available, but I don't think it's a thing anymore. I think they have to write out the contracts and then figure it out from there. But I think this works? We've been shown that it doesn't necessarily work. But they're here to prove us wrong this year. We haven't seen the playoffs where Bertuzzi, Domi, Edmondson is supposed to make a huge difference this year. I didn't even mention him. You know who else is supposed to make a huge difference this year? Simone Benoit, man. We've been on the train all year. I haven't even mentioned him in the stream yet. Simone Benoit is supposed to make a huge difference this year. So love the way he plays and what he brings as well. So that'll be fun, man. It's going to be fun. But I don't know if that is if a trade is available. I don't think it is. So since the MLSE rebrand, only Toronto Maple Leafs and Toronto Blue Jays have not won a championship. The last time both these teams won was 1967 and 1993. Although baseball is different. I think the Blue Jays like 2015 and 16 had great success. Like to make it that far in baseball, like that is impressive, right? They did have success. Obviously they didn't win the thing, and I think they're trying to make it back there. Ask Nick about the Blue Jays on Jays Digest as well. I just think, the MLSE does not concern the Jays. Actually, they're not even a team under MLSE's banner. So the Leafs are the only team in the MLSE banner that did not win a championship since the 2015, I want to say 2014, since they really took everything seriously and wanted everyone to win. TFC won. Man. Brody scoring Brody scoring his first goal in over 100 games. Congrats to TJ Brody, defensive defenseman. I don't think he is going to get into the playoffs, but it should be, I don't know. It should be interesting. I don't think he's gonna make that playoff roster. I think if you're asking me, let me know if I'm being crazy, but I think you don't touch Lyubushkin Riley. You just can't. Although Lyubushkin has struggled as of late, and if you looked at his charts from the last week, oh boy, he has struggled. I think you can't touch that. I think Edmondson, you cannot touch the second pairing of Benoit and McCabe. Has been fantastic, and they bring that physicality. I can't wait to watch McCabe in the playoffs again, and I want to see what Benoit brings. It's going to be a lot of fun. And the last pairing, I don't hate Liljegren and Edmondson. I don't. I think they've been pretty good. I just don't know if Liljegren can keep up in the playoffs. And I think there was a reason Keefe kept them out of the playoffs the last couple of years in favor of Hall. I think there is a reason. So I don't know. And thank you all for tuning in once again. We're going to wrap it up here soon. So leave any comments or questions you have in the chat box about anything to do with the Leafs. Matthews, unfortunately, didn't score 70 goals tonight. The Leafs are playing the Bruins in the first round. Game 1 is this Saturday at 8 p.m. In Boston, which sets up, Boston has home ice advantage, sets up the Bruins potentially having a Game 7 in Boston again, which is going to be a whole big old bunch of fun. That's going to be great. Can't wait to watch that again for the 4th time in 11 years. This has turned into a great rivalry, one-sided rivalry. I mean, the Bruins keep winning. But if you're a Leafs fan, I think you have some hope this year, just based on what happened last year. Should be fun. But yeah, I think that's the defensive pairings. I think with Liljegren being back and healthy, I think that's the third pairing, unless something happens, there's an injury, right? And I think that the Leafs have to go with that top line of Domi, Bertuzzi, Matthews. They have to spread the scoring. Silver lining from Lee Bird, silver lining, nobody scored 69 in 30 years. Yeah, it's true, but I would rather I'm sure he would, and all Leaf fans would rather a nice whole number at 70. I think they would rather that. From Nevster Chester, how are you? How do you think Nyes will fit into the lineup come playoff time? This is very interesting. Nyes has been an interesting player all season long, and I'm glad you bring that up, actually, because I almost forgot about Nyes. Not that he's a bad player or anything. I think he's great, and he was fantastic for the Leafs in the playoffs last year. But obviously, this is his first full season, and the college schedule is very different than the NHL schedule. Like the OHL, for example, I think it gets guys ready faster based, the schedule is a little bit more like the NHL, but college is not. And Nyes is still getting used to that. But now we're in the playoffs, and I think it's going to be interesting. Where he slots in, if McMahon does not come back for game one, which it doesn't really sound like it's going to happen, but it's a possibility, I wonder if he slots in on that second line. Right? If you put him with maybe Tavares and Nylander. You can even play on the third line, right? Like if you put him with Marner, something's going to happen. They played in the playoffs together last year on the top line. Something's going to happen. Even if you move, maybe you do Nyes, Tavares, Marner. That might get Tavares going too. That could be an interesting line. But I'm being a bit of a hypocrite as well because I was calling for Sheldon Keefe to have these lines set weeks ago or have an idea of them. And I think the only one that they have set is the first line. And I'm praying that they go back to it. I am praying that they go back to it. That would be best. But yeah, I think Nyes, we'll see. We'll see. I think he can come up big. I think Holmberg's going to have an interesting playoffs as well. I think he's going to, McMahon too. McMahon is such a wild card. He's played so well the second half of the season. It's going to be great. But yeah, the last time Toronto played Boston, Mike Babcock was the coach. That's right. And it seems like forever ago, but that is the case. They lost in 7 games. Every single series went to 7. So I wonder if this one goes to 7 as well. It'd be perfect, right? But hopefully the result is flipped and Toronto wins this one. Thank you everyone for tuning in once again. Leave all your comments and questions. We're going to wrap it up soon. Just wanted to touch on the Leafs first round series with the Boston Bruins, and obviously Austin Matthews not getting the 70 goals. That's a little disappointing. We're talking about how it's disappointing, right? And he scored 69 goals. Like that hasn't been. He scored more goals. You will never be able to say that Alex Ovechkin scored more goals than Austin Matthews in a regular season. You'll never be able to say that. He scored more. And it would be nice for him to get 70, but he's still only 26. I'm sure he's going to have crazier seasons. Maybe not 80 goals, but yeah, I don't know. It'll be, it's going to be fun to watch Matthews' career. And I mean, like, if he scores 60, let's say he scores 65 goals next year, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think he's going to pass Sundin for the most goals all time by a Leaf. That is crazy. That is crazy. The Leafs had some great players that played for them. The Leafs' problem is that they traded them away and they kept trading and they never drafted guys and made how should I don't know how to phrase it. Like they never had homegrown players that they drafted right for a long time. They always traded for older guys, more established guys to make playoff runs, and they're finally doing that with Matthews, Marner, these guys, Nylander, and yeah, it'll be fun to watch his career. Nevster Chevster again, how are ya? The last time the Leafs beat Boston in a playoff series was in the 1950s. Yeah, 1959. That was a talking point in the 2013 series. I remember the Leafs were not great in 2013. They were falling off as well. And I remember being so locked into that team because they weren't the most skilled, but they played hard. They played with heart, man. And which is ridiculous to say, but they did. They just weren't very skilled, but they tried. They tried hard, okay? And that was a storyline back then. The Leafs have not beat the Bruins in the playoffs since 1959. 3 series later and 11 years later, it's still a talking point and something like the Leafs need to win this series. They need to win this series for more reasons than one. They absolutely need to win this series. Oh, man. Thank you all for tuning in once again. Keep repeating myself, but we appreciate it here on the channel. If you want to go ahead and leave any comments or questions in the chat box, go ahead. I'll be sure to answer them as long as they're reasonable. And anything about the Leafs playoff series, maybe Matthews, or any players that surprised you this season. Samsonov, Woll hasn't been great since he came back from the injury. That's been a storyline. Will Matt Murray see time in the playoffs if there's enough injuries and the Leafs go far enough? That's a storyline. That's interesting. He's playing with the Marlies right now, getting his reps in. I think that's fun. Good for Matt Murray coming back. Good for him, because you never like to see a guy get injured and have their career ended like that. So good for Matt Murray, and he was great for the Leafs last year, I thought, too, besides the injuries. So that's great. Do you remember when Toronto was like on a 7, this is from Blakesome, 7 win streak? Do you think we should go back to those lines? Not necessarily, because I think what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with spreading the scoring looks good to me. I think you should do that. And I think it would work against the Bruins, because the Bruins on paper might not be able to compete with that on the offensive side, at least. Their defense is pretty good, and I like their goaltending a lot. But I think that you shouldn't go back to those lines. I have not liked, since Domi has been out of the lineup the last couple of games, I have not liked Marner back with Matthews. And it's been great for a long time. But I just love the mix of Matthews, Bertuzzi, and Domi. I love the mix that they bring. Domi brings that playmaking. Matthews obviously scoring goals, can make plays, tough on the boards, right? Great stick checker. And Bertuzzi as well. You know, he gets the puck. He's hungry. He creates space. He can score. He can chip in there. He's going to be a difference maker in the playoffs. That's why they got him. So he should be a difference maker. I wouldn't go back to those lines. I wouldn't. I would keep them the way they are right now, personally. But we'll see what Sheldon Keefe does. It's not my opinion or my job, so we will see what he does. From Nefster Chester again, thank you for the questions, guys. This is awesome. This is awesome. Not Austin, but a mix of both. This is Austin. This might be a hot take, but is Domi a better passer than Marner? He might not have better vision, but in terms of accuracy. Honestly, I don't know if that's a hot take. Domi's a great passer. If you watch his OHL highlights, he makes some ridiculous plays. And I think he even made some ridiculous plays to Marner when they were playing in London together. In terms of vision, I think Marner sees the ice far better. I think he's a higher IQ player, if that makes sense. Offensively, at least. Actually, defensively as well. I shouldn't say that. All around he is better. But in terms of actual pass accuracy and maybe saucer passes too, Domi is so underrated. He is so good at that. So I wouldn't say that's necessarily a hot take, but I think Marner's a great player. I'm not disrespecting Marner or anything like that. Marner is a great player, but Domi is a fantastic playmaker, great passer. So yeah. And just think what Tampa Bay did to us tonight, and 10 times that what Boston's going to do to the Leafs, I guess. Yeah, I don't think that's the case. The game tonight did not matter. And I think that showed. Martin Jones was in that. When was the last time Martin Jones played? I don't think anyone really cared tonight. Austin falling just shy of 70 isn't his fault. His teammates let him down 2 nights in a row. I don't know. That's from Bill. Bill, I don't know if that's the case. Matthews had a lot of chances to score tonight. Last night, I would make the case for that. I think the team fell completely flat on their faces after a pretty good first period, considering. And so I would say that would be true for last night, but tonight he had many opportunities to score, and he did not bury. And I'm not saying that's his fault. He's the best goal scorer in the league. But unfortunately, that is what happened. That is, he fell shy of 70, and I think it's a great accomplishment still. He scored 69 goals. In terms of Leafs records, the guy he beat was himself. So, I mean, he had a fantastic year if you want to look back on it like that. From Blakesome, if Marner gets signed next year, how much do you think he's going to ask for? Well, I'll tell you this, all right? I don't know the exact number. It's going to be more than Nylander. That's where it starts. It's going to be more than Nylander because he thinks he's more valuable than Nylander. But I think he's got to make himself more valuable than Nylander. Like, Nylander started playing on the penalty kill because I think it's the Leafs management and coaching basically saying, hey, we gave you all this money. You're going to have to step up because we can't use this money in different places now. So you're going to have to step up and play different roles. So I think it's the same with Marner. And yes, he plays in every situation, but I think he's got to get better if he's going to ask for that money as well. He has to get better. You look at the top end players in the league this year, like Kucherov, McKinnon, those guys, McDavid, how could I not even mention him? They're putting on shows, they're putting up big points. Marner has to do the same thing on the offensive side of the puck, and then he has to make himself useful on the penalty kill, which he's been doing. If he does that, then yes, you can ask for that money, right? But I think it starts with more than Nylander, and I think that's a little scary. Yeah. I think, well, that's not true, but yeah, I think it starts with more than Nylander. I don't know what it gets to. he could even ask for more than Matthews, but Matthews' contract is shorter. And I think he asked for a shorter term contract as well. Sorry to spend so much time on this topic, considering it's playoffs, because we'll get to this in the summer, I'm sure. But it's going to start with more than Nylander. I don't know if it goes more than Matthews, just based on perhaps egos and stuff like that and not allowing him to. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I think he's going to ask for a lot of money. From J Money again, great question. Thank you for your questions, everyone. Will William Nylander ever shake off his inconsistent reputation and become a reliable force for the Leafs? Or is he destined to remain a polarizing figure among fans and analysts? I think from day one, there's first impressions, right? And he's had this narrative attached to him since day one. He has. And I don't know if it's his fault or, I think he's developed as a great player. I think he's become a fantastic player, and he's adding the penalty kill to his repertoire as well. Inconsistent in the regular season, yes. And I think sometimes he might go away in the playoffs. But in terms of the big four, big five of the Toronto Maple Leafs, he has been the most consistent in the playoffs. The numbers are there. He has been. But in terms of the regular season, I do think he goes away sometimes and makes some questionable plays. So, I don't know. I think he's 20. I think he's going to be 28, 27. I think that's who he is at this point. He is the player he's going to be. I mentioned Phil Kessel earlier. He was a scorer. And Leaf fans, I don't know about Leaf fans specifically, but the media and everyone said the Leafs are not going to win because he doesn't play defense. But he is a scorer. You have to get defensive players around him. He's a great complement piece to a top line that just scores goals, right? And we saw it in Pittsburgh. He played on the third line, won a Stanley Cup. So to bring it back to Phil Kessel again, I think it's a good comparable for Nylander where it's the same thing. Like, he is who he is. He's a great player for what he does. I think he's adding more to what he can do, like the penalty kill and playing in different situations, all situations really. But yeah, he's got to continue to get better. And I think the inconsistency, I think it is who he is throughout a season. That might be a thing. But in terms of playoffs, I think he does show up in the big moments. I do think that the numbers are there. So we will see. See how the playoff, this is from Blakesom again, see how the playoffs go. And if Bertuzzi does really well, I want to re-sign him. I would love to re-sign Bertuzzi. I think he's been a great piece. And I'm super excited. I hope he does well in the playoffs because that was the whole reason for signing him, let's be honest. So I really hope he does come to life in the playoffs. It'll be fun to watch. And I would love to re-sign him, but I just think that the price tag is going to be too much. So, and I think they got him on a great deal this year, like $5 million. He probably would have got around the same or more on the open market. But he comes to Toronto. He's able to play with great players, and hopefully he has a good playoff run here. And he can get himself, a great contract. But I'm just not sure if the Leafs are going to be able to afford him. That's the only problem. But I would love to re-sign him. I think Domi would be more of a pressing issue, personally. I think get Domi done, but I do like Bertuzzi. And it all depends on the playoffs because they're not re-signing. I think they're waiting to see what happens because a lot will change if they lose in the first round. So I think they're just waiting to see. From Blitz, if the Leafs lose to Boston, what do you think the future is? Do they keep everybody and run it back, or do they splice it up and make big trades? If the Leafs lose to Boston in the first round, we've talked about it earlier on the stream. We have a video on it on the channel. The Leafs will probably be without Sheldon Keefe and Brandon Shanahan moving forward. That's what I think. First of all, in terms of management, if they lose in the first round, those two are you're probably looking at them maybe being let go. All right, that's the first thing we're looking at. Brad Treliving just got here. I'm not sure if he's let go, but it could be a full cleaning house, which would be weird because he just got here. So, but we've seen crazier things in the league, especially, let's say, with the Arizona Coyotes, for example. We've seen crazier things. So, yes, there will be big changes if they lose to the Bruins in the first round. There could be big changes if they lose in the second round. It just depends in the fashion that they lose. It doesn't matter what round. It just depends. Unless it's Stanley Cup final, I guess, right? But you have to get there. You do have to get there. But yes, things will change if they lose to Boston. But they're not. I have a gut feeling that the Leafs will win this playoff series against the Boston Bruins. This is the year. Everything's been building to this. This is literally the winner take all, or that whatever you want to call it, season, all-in season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, this is it. Things will absolutely change after this year. We had a little bit of change last year in terms of the GM, but things have relatively stayed the same in terms of personnel and just adding a little bit more grit. This is the season that's like, all right, things will change. So it's all led to this. You have to slay this dragon or it's a new era. I think that's beautiful. I think it's come down to that. That's storytelling. That is beautiful. So should be fun to watch. From Nefster, thank you for your question, Blitz, by the way. And we're going to wrap it up here in a few minutes. So if you have any remaining last questions, anything like that, throw them in the chat box. I'll get to them before we wrap up here. From Nefster Chester again, that play today when he didn't touch the puck on the high stick, but then you think of the game-tying goal he scored against Florida in Game 5, frustrating for the Leaf fans. Yes, it's true. He fluctuates. I go back and forth on this because I think Nylander is a great player. And we're going back to Nylander again. He makes some questionable decisions sometimes. And I just don't know. I'm all about building good habits. When I saw that, I did not like it. I didn't. But then at the same time, this game doesn't matter. So as long as he brings it when it matters in the playoffs, I think we're all going to forget about that very quickly. As long as he brings it. It is very frustrating, though, when he does stuff like that and it leads directly to a goal. It's just that this game didn't matter. Although not getting Matthews to 70 is going to sting a little bit. It does suck. Although it's a great season for him, it does sting a little bit. I think Boston from Ilja, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. I think Boston will win games 1-3 and Toronto will win games 4-7. The reverse sweep. I think that would be interesting, wouldn't it? I think it's going to go similarly to the last time. It's going to be 1-1, 1-1, 1-1 all the way down until the Game 7. I think it is. It's just going to go back and forth. It's going to be tight. It's going to be tight, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Honestly, I think that's what it comes down to. From J Money again, will the addition of veteran leadership to the Maple Leafs roster be enough to guide them through the pressures of the playoffs, or a deeper changes needed to achieve postseason success? The one thing about the veteran leadership that the Leafs added and have been adding is that they've never won Stanley Cups. And I think that's something I've mentioned on the channel before and not too many people talk about. They add all these guys who've never won Stanley Cups throughout the years. They added Edmondson this year. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's been there. And he's been to a Stanley Cup final outside of winning the Stanley Cup with the Montreal Canadiens. Actually, the same season that they beat the Leafs in the first round when they were down 3-1. So I think that is good. But I think they need to add more of that. You need more guys in the room. Like when they added Jake Muzzin, and you saw it in the Amazon documentary, he's telling the guys, you have to play harder. Like, I know what it takes to win, and you guys are not doing it. And I think you need more of that in the room. I do think you need more guys who won the Stanley Cup in the room or around, or just around, like Jake Muzzin is, for example. You just need more guys like that. I think that's super important, man. But I love that they're adding more veteran stuff and leadership, because that is important, because if you really think about it, the core is still incredibly young, but they're making a lot of money and they're in a way handicapping the team or the management and what they can do to build a winner. But they're going to have to get creative. It's just the way it is. You made your bed with these contracts. So who do you think will start in Game 1, Brody or Liljegren? I do think Liljegren is going to start Game 1. And I think Brody is going to be in Keefe's back pocket, if that makes sense, as like an option to come in if things get a little hairy. And he's like, all right, we need some veteran leadership in this lineup instead. But I do think Liljegren's going to start Game 1. I said it earlier in the stream. My defensive pairings heading into the playoffs personally would be Labushkin, Riley, McCabe, Benoit. We'll hit the Benoit train one time for y'all. I do think it's going to be McCabe and Benoit. And then the third pairing, I do think it's going to be Edmondson and Liljegren. I think that's what it's going to be heading into Game 1 of the playoffs this Saturday at 8 p.m. It's going to be fun. When does the Game 1 start? 8 p.m. It's a little bit later, and it's at TD Garden in Boston. Should be a lot of fun. Thank you all for tuning in once again. We're going to wrap it up here in about 5 minutes. So get your last minute questions in here. This has been a great conversation. Thank you all for your questions and your thoughts. A lot of great insight tonight in the chat box. This has been fantastic. So thank you all. It's been a lot of fun. Get any last remaining questions in there. We're going to wrap it up in about 5 minutes. But it's been a lot of fun. And yeah, I think to get back to that for a second, I think Liljegren is going to start Game 1. But I don't think it's going to stay the same for the entire series. It's going to change. It's going to change. We see it every year. It's just going to change. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a fun series. It just is. One way or another, it's going to be a fun series. And I think if you're a Leafs fan, the one thing that's going to be great heading into this series is we have not seen guys like Bertuzzi and Domi in Leafs uniforms in the playoffs. What's going to happen with that? Will the top guys, actually show up? I know they have the last 2 seasons in ways, but will they actually take over games? And, you know, the goaltending is going to play a factor. The defense, it's going to be a lot. And can they get it done? It's going to be interesting. When does the Benoit train leave? It already left at the beginning of the season. Me and Nick have been on the Benoit train all season. We told y'all at the start of the year to hop on the Benoit train. Simone Benoit has officially left the station. It's just going. It's just going now. No stops. We're headed straight for the Stanley Cup on the Benoit train. There are no stops. It's gonna be fun. I mean, this is gonna be great. Simone Benoit in the playoffs against the Boston Bruins. I just personally hope that the Leafs show up physically against the Boston Bruins, because they're gonna have to. You know what's coming. So do it. Just do it. And I hope they don't get outcoached, because that's been a storyline for a long time as well. Even going back to the Babcock days, it has been a storyline. So who do you think will win the playoffs? Guys, I already told you at the start of the stream. And it's okay if you weren't here at the start of the stream. But the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win the Stanley Cup this year with the help of the world eater, Austin Matthews. And I'm hoping this year that we have a huge performance from Magic Mitch. I'm hoping that is the case. That would be fantastic. They got to be huge in this playoffs for the Leafs. It has to be huge. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in once again. We're going to wrap it up in just a few minutes. Send in any last-minute questions, anything you think is interesting. And we will be doing more streams going forward, probably after games. I think that'd be a lot of fun, just to break things down and get some reactions, because some stuff's going to happen. Let me know in the comments right now, actually, in the chat box, who you think is going to get the Leafs annual playoff suspension. It happens every year. It was Bunting last year. I think it was Kyle Clifford the year before. It happens every year. Who is going to get the Leafs annual playoff suspension? Put your votes in the chat box right now before you wrap this up. I want to see, this is from Archie, I want to see Reeves versus Marchand game 1. That would be a dream matchup, although Reeves is much bigger than Marchand. I don't think that's going to be the case. You just don't go after guys' best players. I don't think that's going to happen. Obviously, play hard against them, right? But I just don't think like Reeves is going to jump Marchand or anything like that right off the jump in game 1. But I do think that's going to get physical, and there's going to be a lot of fights. I think it's going to be great. Ryan Reeves is going to take the playoff suspension. My guess at the beginning of the stream was Jake McCabe, just because he plays with such an edge, and I feel like just the game happens so fast, and we saw it last year with Michael Bunting. Things just happen so quickly. So, but I'm telling you, like, it's not a joke. Like, who's going to get the Leafs annual playoff suspension? It's going to be fun to watch this Leafs playoff series. Well, everyone, the Leafs are playing the Boston Bruins in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs once again for the 4th time in the last 11 seasons. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll have it all broken down for you every day here on the channel. Nick and I will have it broken down for you. It's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, it's going to be great. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate all the comments and the great chat. It was good after this game. And Nick and I will keep you updated for the rest of the series, and hopefully Leafs make some noise in this year's playoffs. If you want to check out any of our other videos, click on your screen. And if you want to check out some of the videos I was mentioning about some changes that might happen in the Leafs this season, whether it be players, management, we have a video on that on the channel, so go check that out. Thank you, Nestor Chester, and thank you everyone for tuning in to the stream. We'll be back. No, Archie, you were here. I answered a couple questions. You were here. But thank you, everyone, for tuning into the stream. We will see you next week after one of the Leafs playoffs games.